Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's choosing to join us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives. We spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on it, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. Or you can join us live. You can go to your zoom.us, and there'll be a list of phone numbers you can use, and you can just get on a phone call and call one of the Zoom numbers and then enter our meeting ID number, which is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. And you can join us live, or you can send us an email, and if we get an email from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archive for your feedback or your input. And we appreciate when people do that. It just makes it so much easier for us to live into our intention with this work. Our intention is to be of service, and that is just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So, how can we be of service? Unmute yourself, chime in, let us know how these things are landing for you. We're about the 8th. We're just about a month away from Christian Sundberg joining us for one of these discussions. So if you have questions or comments for him, please write them down and we'll try and get to them. You can email them to me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. And we appreciate it when people do that. These varying perspectives are extremely valuable. And if you'll share your perspective with us, we'd appreciate it. The Q&A that we're reading from the book A Walk in the Physical is with Christian Sundberg. The next question is, so since there is definitely suffering happening, how can all experience be rooted in love and joy? And Christian writes, well, loving and joyful beingness gives rise to manifest experience, parentheses, as defined experience within constraints like ours, close parentheses. And suffering only happens when that, quote, distance, close quotes, away from the whole, or all that is, gets experienced and the individual buys into it and loses him or herself in the form. In other words, the person gets identified with or associated with discrete objects or stories, or that person wields a fear-based intent within a limited context. The suffering happens through the stories that we buy into and we think are so real, but they are not fundamentally real. And as we interact with reality in ways that are not in alignment with the deeper truth of love, in other words, if we're acting from fear or hostility, even pain is not already charged. It does not automatically have a negative meaning. At its root, it is a potentially extreme sensory experience. Meanwhile, the depths of beingness itself always remain present. Consciousness doesn't go anywhere. And beingness with a capital B is always full of love and joy. The separate self and its ego may protest and say, no way, I'm suffering and I reject it. However, suffering is only possible through such a separate self, and the separate self rejects. The true self doesn't reject. The true self allows, embraces, trusts, and thereby transcends all things. The next question is, I'm questioning why spirits would voluntarily elect to enter a body that will suffer untold physical pain, trauma, and horror. There are dark corners beyond imagination all over the world. If I were a spirit, I don't think I would willingly participate in this kind of existence. I don't think I could elect to forget everything I know and enter to a life of unimaginable torment and suffering. What sense do you have, if any, of the purpose of this system? And Christian writes, this question is not one that can be sufficiently addressed with many words, let alone just a few. But I will at least say this. The spirit's goal is not to avoid suffering at all costs. Rather, experience is precious to the soul, and it knows there is absolutely nothing to fear. So it makes bold ventures into discrete experience to ultimately expand the joy of being. It does that even when temporarily deep suffering is possible. Knowing that nothing can ever go wrong, truly ever go wrong, and knowing that its own being and the love of capital S source is far deeper than any suffering, and that the love of source can never be conquered. Knowing that the earthly ego rejects this mightily, but even in the suffering that occurs in that rejection, there is opportunity for expansion. So, it's like saying, why would anybody ever go to college? I mean, especially if your parents had enough money to send you, why not take that money and invest it in something else and buy a house and just get on with living your life? Because if you go to college, you're going to have to take tests, you're going to have to study, you're going to have to pull all-nighters, you're going to have different high-stress times when 2 or 3 professors are throwing big projects at you or deadlines or final exams in the same week, and there's not going to be enough time for anything. Why would you put yourself through that? Well, the answer is because there's a process of growth that comes from living through different experiences. It's a process of well, I guess the only way to say it is expansion through experience. So, if we're sitting here saying, I can't imagine why anybody would come from a bliss state into this physical state, then just leave it at that. I can't imagine it, but that doesn't mean it's not real. That doesn't mean someone else can't imagine it. My imaginings are extraordinarily limited at different times based on what's been programmed into my thought process and my life experience. So the next question is, I can't stand to see other people or animals in pain, and pain seems to be everywhere. The world is so very dark. How can we do anything but reject it? And Christian writes, while it is admirable to desire that our brothers and sisters be spared from pain, at the same time, a rejection of reality is often driven by ego and not by spirit. When we reject or denounce the flow of life that actually is, we are automatically aligning with the separation. That does not mean that we have to be okay with the bad. Rather, we should fully meet every present moment and act accordingly. Let the truth of life act on us. Let our responses flow in that natural ebb and flow of stimulus and response. When we reject or renounce what is, we prevent ourselves from being right there in the moment and to be okay with whatever's unfolding and letting it act on us. In that there is both a peace and a healing of the circumstances. In other words, there is a difference between a rejection of a reality and the decision to act from love in the presence of wherever you are. And in that case, maybe to work to heal something you see that needs to be healed. This latter approach is actually harder to do because it means fully feeling, fully meeting the experience head on, and accepting ownership for all the messiness of the whole world, rather than denouncing the world. And yet also underneath all the thoughts and judgments, the peace of awareness itself always remains unharmed. To put it another way, when we reject the world, we lose our peace. And when we are doing that, we become part of the problem. Krishnamurti would talk about this as how it's a violent act to reject anyone or anything, to name call, to swear at, to insult, to, critique negatively is a violent act. It's the mental, emotional tearing apart of, we're saying whatever or whoever this is doesn't have a right to exist. It's bad or wrong the way it is. I can't begin to work with something that I won't fully accept. And if something happens and I say, wow, this is serious, this is intense, this is important, this needs a true loving response, I have to be able to see and feel the situation in front of me before I can get to that. I can't be saying, oh, that's horrible. Oh, stop it. Oh, that should never, oh, that person should be tortured and put to death. And now I'm judging. Now I'm pushing away. Now I'm not even really looking actively at what's going on. I've already decided everything. I'm right. The world is wrong. It's subtle. There's no reason to argue. That's not what we're advocating here. We're advocating questioning. We're advocating staying wide open. We're advocating letting the truth of life act on me fully and let my response to life flow from the flow of life, moving in, through, as, and around me in the moment. The next question he asks is depression a physical ailment or a spiritual one? And Christian answers, we cannot dissect the various levels of the being. They are connected and they affect one another deeply. The body arises within the spirit and also affects the spirit. The constraints of being human and biological are very high constraints. Neurochemical imbalance can be rooted either primarily in physical mechanisms. These can be affected by physical lifestyle choices, diet, and exercise, or it can be psychological mechanisms. These can be learned in response to trauma, or they can be spiritual mechanisms, being level of fear. And each one affects the others. While the physical health and biochemical condition of the body often seems foremost in what physical emotions are experienced, and while they do very much, quote, frame, close quotes, how one's consciousness is capable of perceiving that physical world at any given time, even though that's true, the spirit is always first, and the body always listens to the spirit. There is a direct and constant connection. So spirit has the primary power, and thus healing is always possible. Also, sometimes when the spirit, quote, heals, close quotes, or when fear is faced, an external physical condition or solution will make itself known. I have personally experienced extremely painful neurochemical imbalance, and I feel it's very important for the experiencer to remember that is not who they are. We are not the feeling. We are not the pain. It is more powerful when we do not assign meaning or a story to the pain. Rather, neurochemical pain is like any other pain. It's just sometimes exceedingly strong, but it is just a sensation nonetheless. When we can see it as just a sensation rather than a story, and we fully allow it to just be present, it will be able to leave on its own. The consciousness of the experiencer remains always. And no matter the depth of depression, therefore the peace of our true being is always present. There is no experience, even the darkest depression, that takes place truly separated from the underlying bliss of being itself. While that bliss may seem impossibly far away at times, we do always have true power to take a step back toward it, not by rejecting the pain or indulging in yet another story about it, but rather by bravely going through the present moment exactly as it is. In other words, immerse and allow. In other words, soften and breathe. In other words, if it's happening, it's perfectly okay, and there might be something you could do in this moment with your mind energy, with your choice of words and actions that can be a blessing to yourself and others. The next category is titled The Nature of People. And the first question he asks is, I see greed and selfishness everywhere. People are just so mean to each other. Is this not evidence that we are bad and sinful creatures? And Christian writes, we all have a lot of fear. He puts in parentheses, that which has yet to be evolved, close parentheses. We all have a lot of fear, and where there is fear, there is ego and all of the ego's workings. Yet the true nature of every single person is one of love, even as we seem to become lost in the illusion of separation for a while. Every person is a part of creation, a part of God, a part of light, a part of love, a part of all that is. Meanwhile, we see in the world what we believe about the world. So oftentimes, the way the world appears to us is more a reflection of us. In parentheses, he writes, what we are and what we believe, close parentheses. It's more a reflection of us than it is an accurate view of the world itself. Guy Finley has stories where he talks about how in order to see something accurately in this kingdom, you must first see yourself in whatever you're looking at. It's all an inside job. We are only projecting from our mind's history and content into our mind's images, and then effectively at different levels convincing ourselves that what the images that are showing up in my mind are an accurate presentation or representation of what's actually happening in the world around me. So the next question he asks is, it sometimes seems that people never change and their faults remain with them for a lifetime. Why is that? Christian writes, our fear yet runs deep, and so the ego remains strong. Thus, it can sometimes take many experiences, sometimes even many lifetimes, for us to work through fear. We are all always working with and through our own imperfection. Regardless of how much physical time that process may appear to take, and while the road may be long and winding, all are naturally working through their experience, which facilitates the evolution toward love in one form or another. And he writes in parentheses, whether they're consciously aware of it while human or not. So even if we're not consciously aware of it as human beings, every life experience is there for us, moving us through life in a process toward a level of, you might call, wisdom or awakening. The next question he asks is, why do people need to be atheists? In parentheses, it says, or have any other religious or non-religious affiliation. And he writes in answer, this question is a bit like saying, quote, why do people need to come to their own conclusions, close quotes, or, quote, why do people need to respond in ego, close quotes. And Christian goes on and writes, The conclusions people reach are not the truth of their being. That is true even if the subject of their conclusion concerns whether God exists or not. The truth of our being transcends the forms and context of our world and our personal conclusions about that world. God, or what we call capital S source, all that is absolutely real. It's in fact more real than the dream of earthly life. Why then lament when the dreamer goes along with the dream, which itself occurs inseparably within God's own unconditional love? So why lament an ending, the end of a relationship or the ending of a life, because the person who's been dreaming of having a life, the dreamer goes on? Your consciousness goes on. Consciousness was never born. Your consciousness will never die. Your thoughts about you are not the same as you. Another question he asks is, isn't even love done ultimately for selfish motivations? Isn't everything humans do ultimately selfish? And Christian writes, loving choices made out of genuine loving intent are not selfish. The self exists. It exists, and it is good that it exists. Put another way, the self is, quote, what is, close quotes. That self is far more than just the local, apparently separate human personality. So love or service of the whole, capital WHOLE, and service of all other parts of the whole is a service of what is. The part can serve the other or the whole with true altruism, with no need or desire of any reward whatsoever, even as the other is actually another part of itself. The desire to experience joy and reflect one's true nature, which is love, and to reflect that through action, this is not selfishness. It is native to what we are. It's what life itself does. Life keeps living and expanding and creating and extending. And that's what consciousness does. And that's what you are. You are of consciousness. There is no shame or selfishness in thriving in your native, joyful, true nature. There's nothing wrong with being happy. There's nothing wrong with appreciating how far you've come and the benefits of the hard work you've done. There's no harm in any of that. It's natural and it's good to serve others. It's natural and it's good to take care of oneself and to love oneself. And it's natural and good to feel great and to want to feel great. Yet we should also be aware that the ego can be very easily set back and get a hold of these ideas and seek to serve the separate self in the convincing guise of something more altruistic. Love is always about the service to the other and the whole, the totality of all it is, because you're a precious part of that whole. And while it's often very difficult to wield intent that is pure and not in any way in service to the ego of the separate self, while it's difficult, it is possible to just hold this capacity to extend your true nature, just to extend your true nature, just because that is your true nature, because it's just life expanding and extending. The next question. I wish to communicate what I learned during my spiritually transformative experience, that love is the answer and there is nothing to fear. However, I find most people reject it. Why do people reject it? What can I do to communicate it better? And Christian responds by saying, even the following truth is rejected by many, and often in the name of earthly learned, quote, righteousness, close quotes. And the truth that's offered is, quote, we are loved unconditionally and accepted no matter what, close quotes. He writes, here on earth, what we wish to communicate must make it through the thick filter of the listener's beliefs and ego. Do not fault the listener when that happens, for they are yet another brave spirit who is finding their way through this obfuscation known as the human condition. The attempt to proselytize others is usually futile. I feel we should be patient, tolerant, and present. If you are keen to make yourself available, that may be enough, as your intent will allow windows of opportunity to share the love that you know yourself to be. So we're about the halfway mark. We have plenty of time for comments or questions. Today's a Tuesday, so there will be a support group tonight from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. And we'd be happy to have you join us or pass that information along to somebody you think might benefit. All the information you need to join us absolutely free is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. And please remember, if you go there, there's a separate login page for Tuesday and a separate one for Thursday. So you can't join with Tuesday's login information on a Thursday and vice versa. So today's a Tuesday, and we'll have a support group tonight. And we have plenty of time for comments and questions. And please remember to try and write down your questions for Christian, as he should be joining us in about a month, August 8th. The next category of Q&A is titled Life on Earth. And the question is offered, are we here to learn or simply to experience? I ask this because I would assume our souls are far more knowledgeable and perfect than we are as physical beings, and therefore have no need to learn anything. And Christian writes, this, quote, learning, close quotes, that we do is not intellectual or behavioral. It is simply experiential. There are some things you can only, quote, know, close quotes, and be, close quotes, by actually being them. We deeply integrate experience, and that expands the soul. The change is in the quality of what we actually deeply are. Ultimately, we're moving towards love. This is not a conditioning or intellectual learning of some kind. In my pre-birth experience, I chose to come to this life primarily to face a very old fear that had, quote, bested, close quotes, bested me previously. I came to experience an extremely low vibration on purpose because I knew that if I could integrate that, the expansion of personal and collective power and joy would be unfathomably beautiful. I knew I was serving both myself and the whole by agreeing to undertake this experience. So from the higher perspective, from the integrated non-physical perspective, the soul, the consciousness, could see the potential benefit for going through a difficult situation and then choose to go through it. The next question is, many near-death experiencers speak of telepathy. But now I'm hearing that we all have telepathy. Why aren't we using it? Is it too difficult? Christian writes, when we come to experience this local universe, we are bound by the constraints of being human. They include the constraints of the veil, which is limited memory, and the human biology. Technically, though, one's consciousness always retains its native capacity. So telepathic communication is still possible, though most humans are generally exclusively focused on the defense physical world objects and thoughts. I read that incorrectly. Most people are focused on the dense physical world, the physical objects, the physical thoughts. And so conscious telepathy is not common here, while it's very common in other reality systems. The next question. Many near-death experiencers talk about the importance of love. If we plan before coming to Earth to engage in painful or even potentially harmful scenarios, why do we bother with compassion, kindness, gentleness, patience, and love? Why do we go through the trouble of such choice and choice making if our true nature is already love? Why practice love at all? Christian writes, I think the short answer is that joy is wonderful. So the expansion of being, which is an ultimate expansion of joy and love, is its own reward. In other words, the expansion of potentials through choice making, even difficult choice making, by definition, this yields its own fruit. And as creative beings, we love to expand that true nature. That process is served when we choose compassion, kindness, gentleness, patience, and love. Conversely, when we act from fear and ego, we only add to the difficulty for ourselves and for others. The next question is, I've heard that we're living in a computer simulation. Is that true? And Christian's answer is, the computer simulation is an analogy. It's not a literal computer. But this reality is what Tom Campbell calls virtual. That is, constructed within higher systems for the sake of the players having unique experiences. A part of that game is forgetting the rest of what we are while we're here. So your true nature goes on, and yet you're only focused on this tiny little bit of it that shows up in the physical body. Next question. Are negative emotions derived from consciousness itself only? And he writes, no. Bodily emotion occurs biochemically. The consciousness then has to deal with or wield intent and make choices based on new constraints. For instance, if you have depression in the form of low serotonin, the entire world will seem gray and sad. However, also note that biochemical emotion arises not just from physical things like diet, genetics, state of health, sunlight, nutrition, etc., but also from the consciousness, the intent, the choice making, and other aspects of the self that are arising, fear, and etc., and how that consciousness is utilizing or interacting with its local personality. In other words, the mind structures, its past experiences, all of these things that it has come to build and experience over the lifetime. These are thought patterns, interpretations, beliefs, etc. The body and its emotions are highly responsive to consciousness. So consciousness is generally more responsible than we might think. So everything is always interacting. And when you can choose for love over fear at a conscious level, it's always a good thing to do. Next question is, I don't like not remembering. Why do we have to have the veil? Christian writes, here are 4 pertinent comments. Number 1, the veil permits us to focus down fully into this human experience. You couldn't very well have the full experience of going to work and using the bathroom and all of that if you knew that you were, say, the sun or the entire galaxy spinning. Point number 2, the veil prevents very painful homesickness. Point number 3, the veil permits new self-discovery free from past identities. In that sense, the veil is additive, not subtractive. And the 4th point is the veil forces you to deal with an intensely rigorous environment that can prompt a lot of fear. And there is opportunity in facing and healing that fear and making loving choices, even in that context. So the veil permits us to focus down into this human experience. The veil prevents very painful homesickness. And the veil permits brand new self-discovery. And the veil forces you to deal with an intensely rigorous environment that can prompt a lot of fear. And there's an opportunity in facing and healing that fear and in making loving choices, even when fear arises from the context. So, can you make your life better by simply assuming that whatever happens is happening for you rather than to you? Can you make your life better simply by choosing this filter that says whatever's happening is happening for me, not to me? The next little question and answer reads, how seriously do we need to take life? In short, he writes, we don't need to be too serious, period, exclamation point. The spirit is fundamentally joyful and loves experiencing things for fun and just for the sake of experiencing them. It is only through human conditioning and the rigorous physical constraints of this world where physical things live and die that we end up adopting our serious, local perspective. But we always have the choice to alter our perspective, and we do not have to take things too seriously. What are your thoughts? What are some of the ways that you catch yourself from time to time taking yourself too seriously? I'm I'm routinely brought to mind of different situations where people have taken themselves way too seriously, or they've taken their conclusion about life and life experiences way too seriously, for my taste anyway. And it's okay that people do that. It's okay if people want to choose for fear over love. It's not recommended, but it's okay. And how do we know it's okay? Because it happens. It has to be okay if it's happening. Now, does that mean it's actually optimal? Well, at some level, perhaps. But it also might mean that in order for things to reach what we would call optimal level, we would need to have somebody consciously adding to the energy of this situation from a loving, compassionate, inclusive perspective. And whenever you add that powerful creative energy, it creates more like unto itself. You know, it's the old adage that every tool is only going to produce results that look like the tool. This is one of the big truths of our life, is that you can't hate your way into love. You can't fight your way into peace. You can't, scream your way into serenity. So again, please consider sending us comments or questions you might have for Christian Sundberg, who hopefully will be with us. I believe it's a Friday, August 8th. And just verifying that on the calendar here. Yeah, Christian Sundberg on Mind Shifters Radio. So nothing special to do, just show up as usual here on August 8th, and we'll have hopefully a live chat going with Christian, and we welcome your questions and your comments, either about his book or the teachings that it has inspired you to go in search of on your own after being exposed to this book. And again, this is the second time we're reading through this. So we welcome the comments and questions. I can either ask them because they've been emailed in, or you can join us live on that day and date, which we believe is going to be a Friday, August 8th, at our usual time here, 11 a.m. Central. So we have time for comments and questions. My iPad here is telling me we've got about 10 minutes left. How can we support you? How is it landing to hear these Q&As? Sally, did you unmute on purpose?
I did. It's been funny. I've been a couple of times wanting to make a comment, and I'm working with, for some reason, my phone Zoom isn't transferring to my computer Zoom. So that's a me problem. I'll figure it out later. What comes to me is I loved that part that you just read, and that part about, can we know that life is delivering to us? I can't replay it. That you repeated the question twice, exactly what we need for the journey. It was about
That life is happening for us, not to us.
Correct. I was thinking it's about 8 minutes ago. That's exactly the line. And so that's when I was going to jump in the first time. And I thought right now there's some interesting riddles showing up on the radar of my life. One of which is a medical concern. I'll know more tomorrow, but the doctors seem all worried. And so it's just been an interesting journey of every minute keeping my head out of the fear space. Just like what if, what if? And I have the monkey mind that thinks quite actively. And so so it's been like riding a wild Mustang for the last 5 days, 6 days. And that I will bring up in the show tonight. But I have this whole deep knowing that everything is happening for me, and that all the emotion that's coming with what's happening right now is perfect, even though it's not necessarily pleasant. And I just wanted to say that one line, like life is happening for me in every single way, not just my selective little departments of it, but every single way. And that's what I'll share for right now.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think about I think her name is Sherry Ann Tom, who was a woman that I interviewed. Um, well, I think she's had 4 or 5 cancer diagnoses, and I think the title of the book is "The Call of Cancer," something very um, the opposite of what you would think, right? So that here's an invitation to life. Here is the wake-up call. Some people experience it as here's a structure that they put together, Sherry Ann and her partner did, to help people create uh, messages, focus, a roadmap for their life to get through when they assume that, oh, this cancer experience is happening for me. It holds something for me to learn from and to grow through. And um, it was a very important interview for me because on several levels, but dealing with, I think both people who were involved in writing that book had had their own cancer experiences. And the benefit of being able to put that positive spin on something even as intense as a cancer diagnosis, and not just do it once, but do it multiple times. Um, and then I think they wrote a very nice book about that process. So
Thank you. I wrote it down. I will look it up. I will read it. I've been reading some other writers who have been through the cancer journey, and I
well, and the shortcut is to try and go to the journeysdream.org/podcast and then just search for
oh yeah,
cancer or Sherry Ann Tom, Tom is her last name, and listen to the interview and then decide if you want to dig into the book.
Journey's Dream Podcast. Thank you.
journeysdream.org/podcast.
Okay.
Or you can go to onyourmindpodcast.org.
Okay. I will definitely do it. Thank you. Sherry, and what was her last name?
Tom, Tom.
Okay. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome and deserving. It has been one of those blessings in my life to be asked to participate in that On Your Mind podcast and have the hosts of people, both people with lived experience with mental health challenges and people who actually provide services for mental health work that's more holistic or functional or integrative. And it's been quite a lovely opening and expanding of my contacts in life, professionally and personally, from doing those podcasts. I think there have been 197 or 198 of them so far.
That's great. Thank you for your time, your talent, and your passion for people.
Yeah, well, you're welcome and deserving. I come by it naturally. I had it from both parents. And so this is what it looks like coming through an introvert. Right? This is how it looks. And a lot of people wouldn't get that, but
I do.
yeah, some will. Well, I look forward to updates as you see fit. And I appreciate the question. And if there's anything that we can do, either through the use of the tools or a shift in perspective to help you view any part of your life as a blessing and something that's there for you rather than happening to you, please let us know.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we still have a few minutes. If anybody else has a comment or a question, I see some of our regulars here. We've had some variation in who's attending in the Tuesday and Thursday groups, but I believe Guy Finley is back to his Sunday and Wednesday talks. I think his Wednesday talks might still be repeats, but I think he had a new one this last Sunday. And they're talking about trying to make all of the technology work now that they're splitting the coasts. So we'll take a look at some of that tonight, and we'll have room for people to do worksheets and or answer questions about the worksheet process. And we'll be back again tomorrow to keep reading on Christian Sundberg's book, A Walk in the Physical. And I'll just remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.